All right, we'll be adjusting valves on a Kawasaki Prairie 400 today. And what you're going to need is a 10 millimeter wrench and an 8 millimeter socket, small screwdriver, and a large screwdriver. The first thing you're going to do is find top dead center. Now there's a cap that looks similar to this on the side of your motor here, right beside the recoil. And when you pull that cap off with a large flat screwdriver, you're going to look in there, and this is called your inspection window. You're going to look for a mark on the flywheel. So if you look right in there, there'll be a shiny area, and you'll pull your recoil very slowly around. What I do is wait until it catches, and then I just kind of take these fingers and pull it around slowly. The other thing you can do is pull these 8 millimeter bolts out of here, pull this cover off, and do it with a wrench. And sometimes you can find it quicker doing that, but you can also do it this way. A lot of times what will happen is if you'll see the mark, but your flywheel will continue to spin. So if you have this recoil off, you're able just to kind of hold it where you want it. Now when you find top dead center, there'll be a T in there with the mark. You want that lined up with the middle of your window there, and that is when you'll be at top dead center. If your valves are close to adjusted right, there'll be some play in it. So there'll be play on the exhaust and the intake here. And if they're too tight, there won't be play in there. If they're too loose, there'll be a lot of play. So this one here has a lot of play in it. So the first thing you're gonna do is find your feeler gauges here and the specs that we have written down here for you already. 0.14 to 0.19 is intake, exhaust is 0.20 to 0.25. So that's the specs for yours. Now what we're going to do is find something in the middle. So for the intake, we're going to find a 0.18, and that's kind of on the loose side, but that's all right. We'd take, and I'll bend the feeler gauge somewhat so we can get it in there, and then you'll take and spin this down to where it needs to be. So this little flat screw here on the top, this is your adjuster. I just leave my feeler gauge in there, and then you get to where it's too tight, you can't move that feeler gauge, you back it out a little bit. You want to be able to move that feeler gauge in there. It should be snug, but you don't want it so tight that you can't move it. So continue to move it. Now what I do is leave my feeler gauge in there, take my 10 millimeter, tighten it down. Now sometimes that'll tighten the adjuster screw up, sometimes it won't move it at all. If it tightens the adjuster screw up too much, then you'll want to loosen it, readjust it, do the same thing over again. Sometimes what you have to do is take your screwdriver, hold it here, and then tighten this lock nut up. Sometimes it works out pretty slick where you don't have to use both hands to do it. Now you do the exact same thing on the exhaust side. That's 0.2 to 0.25, so it's a little bit looser. So then we'll go over here to the other intake, do the same thing. Put my feeler gauge in there, turn it down. And like I said, these were extremely loose. So you generally would only do maybe a quarter turn or half turn, and that's where you need it to be. Get it snug again. A test that you can do is take the feeler gauge the next size bigger, and if it fits in there, then you know you've got it too loose. If it doesn't fit in there, then you're all right. So put it in there where it needs to be. Tighten this down. I can see here that moved a little bit, but it might be, yeah, that's good enough. So again, you have a little bit to work with, 0.05 millimeters to work with. So if it's a little bit too tight, just go ahead and put the smaller one in there and just kind of feel it out. So then you can put these caps back on. What I like to do before I start the motor, take the recoil, pull it all the way around slowly, or turn it all the way around slowly so that you make sure your clearance is where it needs to be. Then I'll recheck it. I'll find top dead center, I'll recheck it. Make sure that everything's where it needs to be. And that's a valve adjust on a Prairie 400.